The Sarathel Union had always believed the galaxy was a gentle place. For thousands of years, their soft-skinned, peaceful species had grown gardens on the surfaces of floating cities, built crystal libraries that stretched above the clouds, and shaped a society where conflict was almost unknown. Their technology focused on healing, learning, and harmony. They did not build weapons. They did not train soldiers. They never imagined they would need them, but the galaxy had changed long before they noticed. It began with rumors from distant trade routes, silent stations, missing freighters, border colonies that stopped transmitting. At first, the Sarathel believed it was only accidents or natural disasters. They trusted their neighbors. They trusted diplomacy. They trusted logic and kindness to solve every problem. Then the Kreth Dominion arrived. The Kreth were not invaders from legend or ghosts from forgotten ages. They were a rising empire, hungry for territory and resources. Their fleets were fast, sharp, and ruthless. They demanded surrender from every world they met. When those worlds refused, the Kreth simply took them. The Sarathel Union tried to negotiate, but recordings of their attempts became sad jokes across the spiral arm. Small diplomats begging towering Kreth commanders to please talk peacefully. While Kreth warships spread across their skies, within 8 months, the Sarathel had lost 11 colonies. Their borders shrank. Their defenses cracked. Their leaders panicked. The Union Council held meetings every day, but the discussions always ended the same way. We must ask someone for help. But who? No one is strong enough to stand against the Dominion. There must be someone. There is only one option, an elder whispered at last. The beacon. Every voice fell silent. The beacon was something they never planned to use. It was a relic older than their union, discovered inside an ancient ruin during the early days of their exploration age. No one knew who built it. The runes on its surface did not match any known civilization. The few carvings they could translate carried only one message: when danger rises, call to the stars, help will come. Most of the Sarathel had treated the relic as a ceremonial object, a piece of history, not a real tool. But now, their situation was worse than desperate. So the council agreed. In the deep heart of their capital world, inside a chamber untouched for centuries, they activated the star beacon. It glowed with a soft blue light, pulsed once like a sleeping creature waking, and then sent a wave of energy into the blackness of space. The signal traveled faster than light itself, reaching far corners of the galaxy. And then they waited. Days passed. Then weeks. Humans, Kreth, and other legends were spoken of. But no ships appeared in their skies. No fleets answered. The Dominion pressed harder. Villages were evacuated. Factories were repurposed for defense. Families fled to inner worlds. Fear spread like cold wind. After 3 long weeks, the council met again. We received nothing, one counselor cried. The beacon is useless. We have no allies left. Then we must surrender, said another. Perhaps the Kreth will spare us if we show obedience. The word surrender echoed through the hall like a curse. Many agreed. Others cried quietly. Some simply stared at their hands, ashamed that a civilization of harmony could not defend itself. Outside, in orbit, Sarathel ships waited, their hulls glowing weakly with shield energy they barely had power to maintain. They expected to see Kreth warships any moment. But on the 26th day, something unusual happened. A deep hum rolled across the capital's sensor grid. Not Kreth energy signatures, different ones, strange ones. A dozen flashes tore open the space above the world like cracks of lightning. Ships emerged, not sleek like Kreth vessels, not elegant like Sarathel cruisers, but something else entirely. Rough metal exteriors, heavy armor plating, engines that burned hotter than regulation standards. Their shapes were strange, some boxy, some long, some patched with mismatched panels. The fleet looked like it had been built piece by piece from whatever parts the creators could find. But the power coming off them, it was immense. The Sarathel defense grid nearly overloaded from the readings. Identify, the command towers cried. Identify approaching fleet. A moment later, a transmission came through short, clear, confident. "This is the Terran Expeditionary Contact Corps." Terran? The word meant nothing to the council. The voice continued, calm and firm. "We heard your call. We are here to help." The Sarathel froze. They had expected old allies or distant trading partners, maybe even forgotten civilizations returning from isolation. They did not expect strangers. The ships entered orbit smoothly, their engines dimming as they matched speed with the capital's rotation. A primary vessel, bigger than the others, shaped like a wide spear, sent another message. "Request permission to enter diplomatic orbit. We come peacefully." Peacefully? The Sarathel were not sure. The ships looked like they had survived 1,000 battles. After a rushed debate, the council agreed to allow the flagship's landing shuttle. It descended through the clouds, roaring louder than Sarathel shuttles normally did, its metal wings cutting through the atmosphere with fire trailing behind. When the shuttle touched down on the landing platform, dozens of Sarathel guards trembled. They were not trained for war. Their hands shook as the ramp lowered, and then they saw them. Humans. A species known only in scattered myths and lost tales, creatures said to come from a harsh world where storms swallowed continents and animals fought for dominance every day. Stories claimed they were adaptable, determined, and frighteningly resilient. Some ancient records called them Deathworlders, beings evolved on one of the most dangerous planets ever discovered. No one had seen them in 1,000 years. Now they stood on Sarathel soil. The humans were tall compared to the Sarathel, with strong builds and confident steps. Their uniforms were worn but functional. Some carried devices at their belts, tools rather than weapons. Their leader stepped forward, a woman with short, dark hair, a scar on her cheek, and calm eyes that studied everything carefully. "Greetings," she said. "I am Captain Rhea Morgan." The council spokesperson, Elder Thalen, swallowed nervously. "Welcome to the Sarathel Union." Captain Morgan offered a small smile. "We received your distress signal. We came as fast as we could." Thalen bowed slightly. We did not think anyone would answer." "Someone always hears," Morgan said gently. "Sometimes it just takes a while to reach us." As the humans were escorted to the council chambers, Sarathel citizens watched from a distance. Many whispered in fear. Others stared in awe. Children clung to their parents. The humans moved with an energy the Sarathel had never seen before. Sharp, focused, alive. Inside the council hall, holographic maps showed Kreeth forces closing in. Morgan studied them quietly, her eyes narrowing. "Your enemy is strong," she said after a moment, "but not unstoppable." "You have faced them before?" Thalen asked. "No," Morgan said, "but we've faced worse." The council exchanged confused looks. One counselor leaned forward. "Why would your people help us?" "You owe us nothing." Morgan took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. "Because once, when we were in danger, no one answered our call. We know how that feels, so we chose a different path. Now, when someone cries out, we try to be there." The hall fell silent. No speech, no threat, no display of power, just simple honesty. Suddenly, alarms blared across the city. A Kreeth scouting fleet had arrived. Sarathel guards panicked, running in circles, shouting for evacuation orders. But the humans? They ran toward the danger. Morgan tapped her wrist device. "All ships combat formation. Protect the capital. Non-lethal if possible." Human vessels fired their engines and moved like predators through the air. They intercepted the Kreeth ships before the Sarathel even understood what was happening. Explosions lit the sky as human ships outmaneuvered their enemy, landing precise hits that disabled rather than destroyed. Within minutes, the Kreeth fleet retreated. The Sarathel stood in stunned silence. The humans returned to orbit, reporting minimal damage. For the first time in months, hope filled the Sarathel skies. The galaxy soon whispered the truth. The Deathworlders had returned. The Sarathel had always thought of themselves as gentle creatures, living in harmony with nature, building cities that seemed to breathe with the wind. They had never known true conflict. But now, everything was changing. With the arrival of the humans, the Deathworlders, the Sarathel were beginning to realize just how unprepared they had been for the harshness of the galaxy. The Terran fleet, led by Captain Rhea Morgan, had saved their capital from a Kreeth attack. The human ships were not the sleek, elegant vessels the Serathel were used to. They were rough, patched together, but strong. Their power was undeniable. Yet, the Serathel could not help but feel uneasy. The humans, so different from their own people, carried an energy that was foreign to everything they had ever known. They were loud, they were direct, and they didn't seem afraid of anything. As the Terran flagship descended into the heart of the capital, the Serathel watched from below. Their minds raced, filled with questions. Why had these humans come to their aid? What were they truly like? What would they want in return? Captain Morgan led a small group of human officers through the city's halls, their footsteps echoing on the crystal floors. Her crew was efficient, moving with purpose, scanning the environment, their eyes always alert. They didn't flinch at the bright sunlight or the delicate architecture. They simply moved as though they were in their element, like predators who had come to claim their territory. The Serathel guards nervously stood at attention, unsure of how to react. Their hands shook. They had seen warships, but never this. They had seen technology, but never this. The humans wore weapons, but their weapons didn't look like anything the Serathel had ever seen before. At the heart of the council hall, Elder Thalen stood waiting for Captain Morgan. His posture was stiff, his face lined with uncertainty. He had spent his entire life promoting peace, but today he had to meet with the very species that might alter the fate of their world forever. "Captain Morgan," he said as she entered the room. His voice trembled, though he tried to keep it steady. Morgan gave a nod of acknowledgement. "Elder Thalen, it's an honor. You've got a beautiful world here." Thalen didn't know how to respond. How could he explain to this stranger what the Serathel had lost? The hours of work they had put into building a peaceful society, only to watch it unravel in the face of a galaxy that didn't care about peace. "We are grateful for your help," Thalen said. "But we do not understand. Why did you come to us? You are not part of the Serathel Union. You have no reason to assist us." Morgan's face softened, though there was something steely in her eyes. "You're right," she said. "We don't owe you anything, but we've learned, the hard way, that when someone calls for help, you don't ignore them. We were once like you, a peaceful people on a world full of wonders, but we learned that peace can be shattered in an instant." The room went quiet. The Serathel were listening closely. They could hear the weight in Morgan's words, but they could not yet grasp the depth of what she meant. "What happened?" Thalen asked softly. Morgan's expression darkened slightly. She paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "We were once the dominant species on our world. Our planet was a cradle of civilization, just like yours. But we were young. We didn't understand the dangers of the galaxy, and then one day, it came for us. An enemy unlike any we'd ever imagined, worse than the Kreth, suddenly arrived, and in a matter of days, our cities were burning. Our people scattered. We lost everything, and no one came to help." The Serathel were stunned. Their entire society was based on the assumption that there were greater powers in the galaxy that would protect them. To hear that the humans had faced a similar fate shook them to the core. "How did you survive?" Thalen asked. Morgan's eyes flickered with a mix of sadness and pride. "We adapted. We fought. We learned how to survive in ways no one thought possible. We built our own ships, made our own weapons, and we learned to never back down. We became a species that would not be destroyed, no matter how hard the galaxy tried to crush us." Thalen and the other counselors exchanged looks. The room felt colder now, as though they were seeing a different side of humanity, one that was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. "But why us?" asked another counselor. "We are not warriors. We are not a threat to anyone." Morgan's gaze softened again. "Because no one should ever face what we faced alone. You asked for help, and I believe in helping those who ask. Maybe we're not the best at diplomacy, but we know how to fight, and we know how to win." As she spoke, a small group of human soldiers entered the room, setting up strange devices on the walls. They worked quickly and efficiently, as though they had done this 1,000 times before. The Serathel watched, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. "We are here to assist you," Morgan continued. Not just with the Kreth, but with your future. We've been where you are. We know what it's like to face an enemy that is bigger, stronger, and willing to do anything to take what you have, and we know how to stand against it. There was a long silence in the room. The Sarathel didn't know how to respond. Could they trust these people? Could they trust the Deathworlders? Finally, Thalen spoke again. And what do you want in return? Morgan raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? The cost of your assistance, Thalen said carefully. We are not used to such generosity. Why would you help us without asking for something in return? Morgan looked at him, a hint of amusement in her eyes. We don't work that way. We don't ask for anything but the chance to help. The galaxy is a big place, and we can't do it alone. But together, we can survive. The words hung in the air. The Sarathel couldn't quite understand them. They had never been a species of fighters. They had always believed that peace would protect them. Now, they were learning a harsh truth. The humans didn't just come to protect. They came to teach. To show them how to survive. As the meeting ended, Captain Morgan made a point to stand beside the Sarathel leadership, her posture strong and unyielding. We'll help you rebuild your fleets, your cities, whatever you need. But we'll also teach you how to defend yourselves. You can't rely on someone else to save you every time. It's time to learn how to protect your people. The Sarathel were left standing in silence as the humans filed out, their footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Outside, the humans moved quickly to their ships. Their military presence was unmistakable now. They were no longer just diplomats or travelers. They were soldiers, and they carried with them a knowledge of war that the Sarathel had never known. The Sarathel watched as the human ships lifted off, leaving the surface of their world. It was clear that the Deathworlders had not come to conquer. They had come to teach. But the question remained, could the Sarathel learn what they needed in time? As the humans disappeared into the sky, Elder Thalen stood in the silence. He looked out across his world, beautiful, serene, and now vulnerable. And he wondered what the future held. Would the Sarathel be able to stand strong in the face of the Kreth, or would they have to rely on their new allies forever? The stars had answered their call, but the true test was just beginning. The Sarathel had never truly understood the full weight of asking for help until the humans arrived. Now, with their aid, the Sarathel began to realize something even more important. To ask for help meant more than simply receiving aid. It meant responsibility. It meant change. As Captain Rhea Morgan and her fleet worked alongside the Sarathel to rebuild their defenses and strategy, the once peaceful Union found itself at a crossroads. The Kreth Dominion had been pushing harder, the pressure never relenting, and the Sarathel knew they could not simply rely on the Terran fleet forever. They needed to learn, to adapt, to become something more. But there was a problem. The more the Sarathel worked alongside the humans, the more they saw the difference between their two species. The humans did not hesitate, did not second-guess themselves. They moved quickly, without fear or doubt. They taught the Sarathel how to fight, how to make quick decisions, how to protect themselves from the dangers of the galaxy. And yet, for all their bravery, the Sarathel struggled to keep up. They were not a warrior species. They were pacifists at heart. The lessons the humans taught, while essential, were not easy to swallow. One such lesson took place in a small, barely operational Sarathel shipyard. It was an old facility, one that had never been designed for war. Its massive crystal walls were designed to reflect sunlight, to create a peaceful atmosphere. But now, it was full of the sharp, mechanical sounds of hurried construction. Humans and Sarathel engineers worked side by side. But it was clear the Sarathel were uncomfortable. Captain Morgan stood near a workbench, watching as Sarathel engineers hesitated to weld a piece of metal. They were unsure, their movements slow. Beside them, human engineers worked without a second thought, their hands moving with precision. One Sarathel engineer, a young woman named Vielle, stood back and wiped her brow. This is difficult. These weapons. We've never built something like this. Morgan approached her, crossing her arms. I know. It's hard at first. But we don't have time to second-guess ourselves. The Kreeth don't wait for us to be ready. Viel's eyes flickered nervously as she glanced at the unfinished weapons. But we're not warriors. We've never had to build things like this. Our people are builders, healers, not fighters. Morgan nodded. I understand. But you don't have to become soldiers to fight. You just need to learn how to defend yourselves. The galaxy won't wait for you to be ready either. The Kreeth will come whether you're ready or not. The young engineer hesitated. But then she slowly took the welding tool in her hand, her hands shaking slightly. Morgan watched closely, waiting. Vial took a deep breath and began welding, slowly at first, but then with growing confidence. I'm afraid, she admitted softly, but I can do this. Morgan smiled. Good. You can. And you'll keep learning. Just like we did. That's how we survived. The human captain's words stuck with Vial long after the meeting ended. As the days passed, the Serathel began to make progress. They began to adjust to the harsh reality that their peaceful way of life could not always protect them from the cruelty of the universe. But every time they made progress, the questions grew louder. Were they losing who they were? Were they becoming something they didn't want to be? Meanwhile, the Kreeth continued to push. They weren't as careless as before. They had learned to respect the Terran forces, but that only made them more determined. They didn't see the Serathel as a worthy challenge. They saw them as a prize to be claimed an easy victory, one that would cement their power. One morning, as the human fleet finished a training exercise with the Serathel defenders, a report came in. The Kreeth had launched a full-scale invasion. Their forces were larger than expected, and they were moving faster. The Serathel Council gathered in a panic. Elder Thalen stood at the head of the table, his face grim. They are coming. The Kreeth are coming. We cannot outrun them anymore. Captain Morgan stood up from the back of the room, her eyes hard and focused. Then we fight. We don't run. We've been training for this moment. But we're not ready, one counselor objected. Our fleet isn't strong enough. Our weapons, we've done what we can, Morgan interrupted. And now, we do what we must. The tension in the room was palpable. The Serathel knew that even with the Terran fleet's help, they were still outnumbered. They had no choice but to make a stand. Rhea, Thalen said, his voice softening. You've helped us more than we could have imagined. But we have to ask. Will you stay with us when the battle begins? Morgan's expression softened, but she was quick to respond. You don't need us to win this battle. You've learned how to fight. You know what to do. But if you need us, we will be here. For the first time, the Serathel understood. This was not about relying on the humans to fight their battles. This was about learning how to fight for themselves. Humanity had offered them the tools, but it was up to the Serathel to wield them. The battle came sooner than anyone expected. Kreeth warships appeared in orbit above Serathel's largest city, a place that had once been the symbol of the Union's peaceful existence. It was surrounded by beautiful gardens and towering crystalline structures. Now, it was a battlefield. The human fleet, led by Captain Morgan, moved into position alongside the Serathel defenders. Their ships were smaller, rougher, but they were fast, and more importantly, they had the element of surprise on their side. The battle started quickly. Kreeth ships descended from the clouds, their weapons blazing. The Serathel fleet tried to meet them, but their ships lacked the offensive firepower the humans had taught them to install. They were outmatched, but the Serathel didn't retreat. They fought back, using every trick the humans had taught them. They moved in unison, a well-coordinated defense that bought precious time for civilians to evacuate. Captain Morgan gave orders with a calmness that came from years of experience. She watched as human ships danced through the chaos, taking down Kreeth fighters with precision. It was a brutal, fast-paced battle. The humans were ruthless, but not wasteful. They disabled rather than destroyed when possible. But when it was necessary, they finished the fight. Keep them off the civilians, Morgan ordered over the comms. Protect the city's shields. We can't let them breach. The Serathel, despite their hesitation, fought with newfound strength. Their ships were no longer fragile relics. They were weapons. Their engineers had learned how to repair and upgrade their own craft under the guidance of the humans. Their fighters dodged, fired, and held the line. But the Kreth were relentless. Their tactics were vicious, designed to break any enemy in their path. As the battle wore on, it became clear that victory would not come without a cost. Captain Morgan looked out at the battlefield, knowing this was the moment that would define them. The Sarathel had learned. But now, they had to prove it. In the distance, the Sarathel flagship took a direct hit, its engines flickering. For a moment, it seemed like all hope would be lost. But then, just as quickly, the ship stabilized. The Sarathel had repaired the ship mid-battle, something the humans had taught them. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The Kreth retreated, their forces broken by the sheer determination of their enemies. The battle ended with no clear victory. But it was enough. The Sarathel had stood their ground, and for the first time, they knew they were capable of protecting their world. As the last Kreth ships disappeared into the distance, Captain Morgan's voice crackled through the comms. You did it. You fought. And you won. The Sarathel ships, now battered but standing, were proof of something more important. They had learned. They had changed. And they were no longer just survivors. They were fighters. The battle had been won, but the price was high. The Sarathel cities were battered, their once pristine gardens scorched, their buildings crumbling. Yet, in the midst of the destruction, something incredible had happened. The Sarathel had fought back. They had stood tall, side by side with the humans, and together they had pushed the Kreth dominion from their skies. As the dust settled and the final Kreth ships retreated into the void, the Sarathel stood in silent awe. The human fleet, though smaller and less polished than the Kreths, had been the deciding factor. Without them, the Sarathel would have surely been overrun. Now, the humans were preparing to leave. The leaders of the Sarathel Union gathered in the great hall of their capital, a hall that had once been filled with dreams of peace and prosperity. Today, it was filled with something else. Uncertainty. Captain Rhea Morgan and her crew stood before them. The humans had kept their word. They had fought beside the Sarathel, shared their technology, and shown them how to survive in a galaxy that did not care for peaceful ideals. But now it was time for the humans to move on. The Sarathel had no illusions. The Terran fleet would not stay forever. Their people had never been meant to stay in one place for long. They were wanderers, always seeking the next cry for help in the vastness of space. Captain Morgan, Elder Thalen began, his voice heavy with gratitude. Words cannot express what we owe you. You have saved us, taught us, and stood by our side when no one else would. We could not have made it without you. Morgan gave a small smile, but her eyes remained serious. You don't owe me anything. You fought hard. You fought for your world. That's what matters. But you won the battle, another counselor Jalen said. Without you, we would be gone. And yet, you are leaving. Why? Why not stay? The humans exchanged looks, and Morgan took a deep breath before speaking. Because that's not how we work, she said, her voice firm but kind. We came to help, but we can't stay forever. We don't belong here. You don't need us to protect you. You've learned how to protect yourselves. You've proven that. The room fell silent. The Sarathel knew it was true. They had learned, but they weren't ready to accept it. The idea of standing alone was foreign to them. They had always relied on the goodwill of others of the galaxy. To face the Kreth again, without the humans, felt impossible. But, Elder Thalen started, his voice catching, we have no military. We have no experience in war. How can we survive in this galaxy without you? Morgan's expression softened. You don't need to be a military power. You need to be strong in a different way. The humans didn't build empires through war. We survived through resilience, through adaptability. You've learned how to fight, and now you need to learn how to stand tall, even when no one is watching." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. "We will always be here if you need us," she continued. "But you need to start standing on your own 2 feet. You need to believe that you can protect yourselves and your people. The galaxy is full of threats, yes. But it's also full of opportunities. You've already started down the path of survival. Now you need to finish it." A quiet murmur spread through the room. The Sirathel were struggling to accept her words. They had grown comfortable in their peace, in their way of life, but the reality of the universe, the harshness of it, was something they could no longer ignore. "And what happens after you leave?" Jalen asked, his voice uncertain. "How do we face the Kreth again? They won't forget what we've done. They'll come back." Morgan nodded. "They will. But you're not the same people you were when we arrived. You've changed. You've learned. And you will continue to learn. You have the tools now, both the knowledge and the power. You don't need to wait for someone else to save you. You can save yourselves." The Sirathel leaders exchanged looks. It was a difficult thing to accept, the idea of standing alone. But deep down, they knew it was true. They had changed, and they had to keep changing. The humans had given them the chance to survive, but it was up to them to carry that torch forward. As the humans prepared to leave, the Sirathel held a final ceremony. It was a small affair, but it was meaningful. The humans were given a place of honor, and they were thanked for their help. Captain Morgan stood at the front, her face solemn. "Thank you, Sirathel," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "It's been an honor to fight by your side. You've shown strength I didn't expect. You've earned your place in the galaxy. Don't ever forget that." The ceremony ended with the humans boarding their ships, their engines roaring to life. The Sirathel watched them leave, their ships disappearing into the sky, leaving behind a world that would never be the same. As the Terran fleet vanished into the stars, Elder Thalen stood at the edge of the platform, watching. His heart was heavy, but there was also a sense of pride in his chest. The Sirathel had learned what they needed to know. They had been given the tools to survive. Now, it was their turn to stand tall. In the distance, a new star flickered to life in the sky. A tiny spark in the vastness of the galaxy. It was the beacon, the one that had once called the humans to their aid, and now, the Sirathel knew that if they ever needed help again, they could call on it once more. But it wasn't just about waiting for someone to come. The Sirathel understood now that they had to be ready to stand on their own, to protect their own future, and to face the galaxy with courage. The humans had come to their aid. They had taught them how to survive. But now, it was time for the Sirathel to move forward, to face whatever challenges the galaxy would throw at them. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Terran fleet drifted onward, ready for the next call for help, but knowing just as the Sirathel had learned that sometimes, the best thing they could do was help others find their strength, and then leave them to forge their own path.